All right. This is a story that takes place back in the old days of emperors and peasants. So the very rich and the very poor. And in that, it's called the Magic Paintbrush. It's an old Chinese folk tale. And there's several different sort of versions, and I just got one of them off the internet and and took a couple and adapted them together. So I remember this story when I was a kid because I was reading it, and it just brought back such great memories that's why I chose to tell this tale. So once upon a time, there was a boy named Ying Li. He was a peasant, and he had to work and toil in the fields along with his family and especially him. He lived with his two grandparents. They were too poor to even buy pencils for him to draw. So instead, he had to use the dirt and a stick, and that was his only way of drawing in the dirt. But he longed to go to school like the other children. And one day, as he was walking past the schoolhouse, he heard the school teacher say, "I'm going to be teaching painting today, and all the techniques and the colors of painting." And he did so. Now, Ying Li climbed far up into a tree and was looking out below at what all the other children were doing when the schoolmaster caught a look of him, and he scolded, "Get out of here! You are not welcome! You are not able to paint because you do not pay fees here." So Ying Li hung his head and went to his work, and when he got home, he again he colored in the dirt with the stick. The next day, he went back again, and he saw the children again painting in the schoolroom, and the same thing happened. And he walked back. That night, though, he had a dream, and it was of this old man with a long, long beard. And this man came to him, and he pulled out a paintbrush from behind his back, and it was a sort of a wooden long paintbrush that was very old, and it had something special about it. And he said, "This is yours. You may have it as long as you paint for the poor." Ying Li was a little bit confused. Paint for the poor? What do you mean paint for the poor? So he said, "All right, I'll do as you say." The next morning he woke up, and there was a paintbrush next to his pillow, which was a little strange for Ying Li. So Ying Li started to paint, and he decided to paint a bird. And the beautiful bird, when he put the final dot on, flew up out of the paper and flew off. Now, Ying Li was confused and kind of excited. He just found out they had a magic paintbrush. So he knew finally what the old man had meant when he said paint for the poor. So he started going out into the fields, and he painted cows so that they could get milk and eat and toil the soil and grow their crops. He then painted a small, small river so that they could start to make, it was sort of a desert area, so they finally had water enough and they would never be in drought again. And he painted many other things, and the villagers were excited, and he started to spread his work to other villages. Well, the emperor heard about this. Now, the emperor was a greedy man. He did not like he liked being the richest person in the land, and did not like anybody having anything more than he did. And when he heard about Ying Li's gift, he sent out his advisors and his soldiers to go and look for Ying Li and bring him back to the castle. Now, Ying Li was kind of hard to find because he was a little bit more rural area, so he continued to paint things to help out the different people in the land. Until one day, they were walking past, and Ying Li was painting in the marketplace so that he could get money for some new paper in order to continue to paint. When Ying Li did paint, and he wanted to do 2D objects, he never painted the final detail, so his stuff would not come alive until the final detail was painted. So Ying Li accidentally, as the advisors were walking past in the marketplace, dropped one dot of another crane and painted it, and it was the final dot made another crane fly out alive. And this sort of blew his cover. It was really unfortunate. So the advisors arrested him right away and took him to the emperor. And the emperor said, "Paint for me. I want you to paint so that I may be the richest man in the land." And Ying Li said, "I was told only to paint for the poor." And so the emperor locked him up in chains in the basement. The next day, after not having any food and any water, Ying Li again was asked by the emperor, "Paint for me." And the emperor said, "Paint for me." And Ying Li said, "No, I can't." And he finally relented after realizing that he'd be in a lot of trouble if he didn't. So he said, "What would you like me to paint?" And the emperor said, "Paint me the biggest river ever so that our lands may prosper and that I may be able to be rich and have the largest trade in the world." So Ying Li started to paint a bigger river than the one that he had before. And the emperor still was not satisfied. He said, "I want a whole ocean." So Ying Li said, "Okay, emperor." So he painted the emperor an ocean. And finally the emperor said, "I'm still not happy. Paint me a boat so that I may go on this river and start to trade. And don't make it just any boat. Make it a boat gilded with gold." And so Ying Li agreed. And he made a boat, and it came alive. The boat, all of his soldiers and his advisors all went out to go and look for trade, and so did he. Ying Li continued to paint, and he started to paint the wind up above, and the boat started to float off, and the emperor was never seen again.
Yeah.
Ying Li... No, it was not a very nice emperor. So Ying Li learned that even he still was able to help the poor, even by when he was helping the emperor as well. He granted the emperor's wish, but sometimes if you wish for something just a little bit too big, you may regret what you wished for. To this day, the townspeople are still prosperous because of the river and all of the oxen that Ying Li gave them, and their fields today still in China yield great abundance.
I'm not sure how to stop.